Hey, what's up guys, this is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this figure review I want to look at the Play Arts Kai God of War Kratos figure. Now, I'll be happy to admit that I haven't played any of the God of War games since the first one, so I'm not super familiar with the character, let alone his weapons or things, but I thought the figure was cool and I got it for free, so I have the figure even though I'm not super familiar, but I think it's a cool character and a cool design, so I'm happy to have it and I'm happy to talk about it. Let's start off with the figure's height. He's just about standing straight up right now, so that's a good enough measurement for me. He's 9.5 inches tall, so that fits in nicely with most of the Play Arts figures, and he is definitely a good looking figure overall. A lot of great details in the guy. There are a couple problems, as are common with Play Arts figures, and I'll point those out, but otherwise it's a really nice figure. Before we get into it too much, let's talk about accessories. He obviously comes with these two sword bladed weapons, whatever they're called, I do not know. The weapons have a peg hole in them right there, and it goes straight through, and what you can do is you can peg the chain in on either side of the weapon, obviously, or you can use this large peg that came with it to put them on his back, which looks kind of weird, but I suppose it was like that in the game, so it's okay. But as I said, the peg for the chain just goes right in there, and the chain blends in nicely with the sculpted chain on his wrist so that it doesn't look particularly off, and it also can unpeg from the wrist. It's kind of tricky to do because it's such a small peg, but so as you can see, so there's chain sculpted, and then the chain that he comes with matches pretty well, so that's pretty cool. You can undo the chain from both sides if you want to. We'll do that for the sake of the review, so that it's not dangling all over the place. It does get stuck in the wrist joint sometimes, so be careful. Don't just yank on it. If it's not moving, it's probably stuck in the wrist joint, which is no big deal. That's just a matter of moving the wrist. And be careful that your pegs aren't stuck in the holes, or you could snap the chain. So there's that. He comes with those two. He comes with the two chains. He comes with these two things, which I have no idea what they are or what they're supposed to be. It looks like they should separate, but they do not. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't know anything about the games after the first one. So if you guys know what it is, let me know. That's fine. But it is a nice kind of accessory, little pike type things. So that's pretty cool. And they have the peg holes as well. I don't know if they're for the chains, but I know it works for the peg on his back, so you can put them on his back however you want. So he's got those. He's got two alternate hands, which are just kind of open grappling type of hands. These two hands are obviously meant for holding accessories. That's all he has. No fists, unfortunately, but that's okay, because he pretty much uses weapons only. He also comes with a stand, which is cool, except this one's busted, so I can't show you its full functionality, but it does come with a stand, and how it works is this piece pegs in down here, and then this, I think you can see through it, it has these little like kind of peg things in there, and this part has a little groove. So what you do is you slide this in, and those little pegs hold it in place. Now mine's split right there, so it doesn't hold it in place very well at all. But as you can see, the metal part is held in place by those pegs, so it doesn't slide down. And this really just, once it stays closed, if it wasn't broken, it just puts tension on the wire, so that when you have it holding him, it holds him nice and tight. So it's a nice little stand. It's not very intrusive. It's nice and hidden because it's little reflective metal with little caps on it, so it won't scratch the paint. But it's a nice little stand, and at the top of its height, you can have it holding the figure at excuse me, just under 8 inches tall. So it's a pretty nice stand, and it could definitely be used for other figures, but it comes with Kratos. Alright, so let's talk about the figure. Paint application is pretty darn good. Everything's pretty much where it's supposed to be. All the different body parts are all the same shade for the most part. Really, the only time we see any trouble with the paint is on the head, which is really common for Play Arts, as I mentioned before. They always overdo the shading and screw up the sculpts just a little bit, and they did a little bit of both on this guy. Overall, the head sculpt is pretty good, especially from the side. I think it looks really good, but from the front, it just looks a little bit off. Maybe it's just me, but I think it looks a little bit off. And then the shading is just really weirdly, heavily put on. So I'm not sure about that, but the detail itself is really good, as you can see on the face. His eyes are nicely done, and there's nice paintwork on there, and they're glossy. And he's got the scar across his face, his scar on his abdomen. Really good details all over. They did a good job, excuse me, with the red lines on his body and on his head and everything. The only time the red really breaks is right here where it's a brighter color. But it's not a huge problem for me since it's in that shoulder joint, so no big deal. The sculpt on the torso is really nice. Actually, the sculpt everywhere is pretty good. I really don't have any complaints except for the face, and that's just a minor one because still, it looks really good. So the details are great. The soft plastic for the skirt part is really good. He's got his little boxer shorts on, and we'll get to the articulation in a minute. But there's really nice shading throughout all the musculature and all the metal parts. And he's got his little sandals on with his dirty toenails. So, oh, and the shading on the metal here for the armor is also very nicely done. It looks great, nice and metallic and shiny. So that's cool. Let's talk articulation. The head is on a ball peg on top of the neck, which is also on a ball peg, though it's fairly limited. You're pretty much just going to get the up and down movement out of it, side to side, not so much, whether it's rotating or actually pivoting. It's pretty limited. I cannot clear my throat, excuse me. So that's it for the head, but it's still plenty of range of motion. You're not going to have any problems there. Shoulders are pretty standard for the Play Arts figures. It has the butterfly joint, as I showed you. Doesn't work as well on this side. It's just a little tighter than it is on this side, but it's still pretty good. And it's actually one of the better looking butterfly joints on the Play Arts figure, so I'm pretty happy about that. And then the shoulder itself is on a ball peg that goes into the butterfly, so it moves around on that, and it has the ball disc. So it's really tight, but it does have the ball disc. You can pretty much get it in any pose you want. Bicep swivels right there, as you would expect. He has the ratcheted ball disc ball hinge for the elbow, so it rotates at the bicep and at the forearm, and has a ratcheted hinge in there. So really plenty range of motion there. Really there's no limitation. And you have the exact same type of joint in the wrist. It's implemented a little bit differently, and you do have to be careful when swapping out the hands because of how this joint is made. It's really kind of fragile, but effectively it's the same type of joint as that. So really there's no limit to the range of motion of the hands other than, obviously, I mean, it can't go 180 degrees because there's plastic, but it's perfectly nicely articulated. Torso, the upper torso, the diaphragm area is on a double ball peg. It's a tiny peg, so it's effectively just a single ball peg, but it is there. It rotates and has all the hinging and everything you need. And then, of course, the lower abdomen is on a single ball peg connected to the three-way ball peg for the groin. We'll get to that in a second. But either way, you have a huge range of motion and really no break in the sculpt at all. It's perfectly done. Really, there's no complaints on this at all. It's just about one of the best Play Arts abdominal sections that I've seen. And as I said, this is soft. It is floating, but it's not too floaty, so it's kind of restrictive. Not too much, but I think you'll be okay with it. As I said, there's a three-way ball peg for the groin, so what you have is the two ball pegs that go into each thigh, and then the one that shoots up into the abdomen, so it's kind of like an upside-down T. And as you can see, so there's the ball peg there, it goes into the hip, and the hip rotates around the ball peg, obviously, goes side to side, front and back. However much you want to do that and however much you want to flex this is up to you. And then, of course, the thigh rotates around that hip piece as well. So you pretty much have a full range of motion in the thigh, as much as you would need for sure. The knees are double jointed, and thankfully they actually gave him a kneecap. A lot of the times the Play Arts don't have the kneecap and it looks really weird, but he does have the kneecap. It still looks kind of weird, but it's definitely better than most outings. And if you just use that top joint, it really doesn't look too bad, so I'm okay with it. I do think they need to work on their knee design though, because everything else is pretty good. The knees still look a little weird sometimes. The ankles have the same joint as the elbows and the wrists, so full range of motion all around. And the peg that goes down into the foot, it doesn't go straight down. It goes down as far forward as it can so that you can rotate the foot around on that peg. And and give him a little extra of an ankle rocker. Even though you can just rotate that joint around and use the ratchet, you do still get to do this as well. So as much rotation and much movement in the ankles as you could ask for. The articulation is really great on this guy. Overall, it's a really great figure. There's just a couple little things I would point out, like I said, with the head and maybe the limitation of this, but overall it's really, really nicely done. This stuff, it doesn't get in the way because of how it's designed. It's connected to the bicep here, so it doesn't impede the articulation barely at all. And this is soft, so that won't get in the way. So that's about it, guys. It is a really solid figure, and I've always liked Kratos, so I'm happy to have it, even though I'm not a huge fan of the games personally. I like the character, and I like this figure, so I do recommend it. It is probably one of the best play arts I've purchased so far. So there you have it, guys. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more figure reviews, more custom figures, and other good stuff. And in the meantime, keep collecting.